Okay, so in this part of the Sec2 algebra, it, this part is known as something called subject manipulation. Basically, it involves all the algebra technique that you have learned so far to achieve a certain aim. Okay, so you will need all the algebra technique. Okay, so I give you the basic idea first, and then I will show you the example that has a different technique. Okay, so first of all, you need to understand a formula first. Okay, so basically a formula is an equation that describes how a quantity is related to other quantity. So it's a very simple idea. So it's easier if I show you. So in this formula, A is equal to pi r squared. So typically A is like area. So area is dependent on the R. So in this case, our area depends on how the values of R is. So when you look at things like this, A is equal to pi r squared. A depends on R. So the value of A will depend on R. So in this case, right, A is the subject. So it's the main person. So A depends on R. So A is the subject of the equation. So I can go for some manipulation. I can switch R to be the subject. So that is called subject manipulation. So we manipulate A out. So here in this case, A is the subject. So when we want to change R is the subject. So we change to R being the subject. So in this topic, we will be learning to change a subject. So we can change a subject to anything that we want in the formula. Okay, so that is one of the basic idea first. Okay, then later on, I slowly move you on to the condition. So for example, C is 2 pi r. So C is the subject. So C is like the main person, is the subject. And C depends on R. So I can also be doing some manipulation, and I can have R as a subject. So I can twist it around. I can change my subject. So a subject is basically the main person. It's like the main character. So I can change out the main character. Okay. So the subject of a formula will usually appear on the left-hand side. So usually our subject will be on the left side. And here will be all other algebra. Okay, so we will be utilizing a lot of techniques that you have done before in all sorts of algebra. Okay, so I'm going to show you numerical example and then see what are the technique involved. Okay, so if you look at example 1, we are supposed to make X a subject. So you got to understand the idea of making X a subject. If I would like to make X a subject, your answer will be X equal to something, and that something, right, cannot have X. Your subject must be on the left side. So you shouldn't have any X on the right side. Okay, so surprisingly, in a very complex expression, some people will have X on the other side as well. And then you totally got no marks for that. Okay, so you must always isolate your X. Okay, like for example here, this is X. I would like to keep it on the left side. So very simple if you take a look. So if this is X, I just need to shift this over. So if I shift this over, okay, I'm left with half X. But when we say we make X a subject, that means it has to be 1X. So you can think about multiplying 2 on both sides. So if you multiply 2 on both sides, you are left with an X. So that is make X the subject. So that is the answer. Because if you look, there is no X on this side. So X is right now the subject. So X is the main person. And on the other side, you don't see any X. Okay, so this one is a very simple one, just to build the idea. Okay, the next one, cross multiplication is quite a common technique. Cross multiplication will be a very common technique to make X the subject in the subject manipulation. So here in this example, I'm showing you a cross multiply. So when you cross multiply, you make sure you remember your bracket. Okay, so the subject that you are interested here, is hidden in the bracket. So some of you may be thinking, oh, do I need to expand out the bracket? Yeah, sometimes you might need to expand out the bracket because your subject is hidden it's like locked inside a bracket. But in this situation, because it's a bracket times bracket, we can divide the bracket over. So we can choose to divide the bracket over. And then I can choose to bring the 2 over. So if you look, this is already your answer because you already made 1x. So that is already your subject. And if you take a look here, this part doesn't have x. So essentially, this is your answer already. So if a student gave this as an answer, the student is okay. The student is correct. Okay, but sometimes the question will require you to make it into a single fraction. So sometimes the exam question will require you to make it into a single fraction. So you got to apply your fraction technique. Okay, we have done fraction in one of the other teaching worksheet. So in that fraction, if you want to make it into a single fraction, you need same denominator. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So you need to make same denominator, then you can have a single fraction as your answer. So this can also be the answer. Okay, so this one is also a correct answer. So if another student gave this and you realize here there's no x, so this is also a proper answer. So for some of you, right, then you may be thinking, both looks very different, but they are the same answer. Okay, so that's why in this topic, right, sometimes you might be thinking, how come my answer doesn't always match? So does that mean that you're wrong? Actually, sometimes you're not wrong, but you may not have the awareness. How do you go to that answer? That means technically you're not strong enough to judge that they are actually the same expression. Okay, so if you look at this one, comparing these two answers, they look very different. So for those of you who, if your fraction idea is weak, then you may be telling me, my answer is not correct. So I don't know why there are two different answers. So the two possible answers are linked because of your fraction technique. Okay, so for this question, we have the cross multiply technique and we got the fraction technique. Okay, so that will be the basic idea first. So you need a lot of switching around. If your algebra is good, your technical skill is good, you'll find that this topic is actually very easy. It's just switching around. Otherwise, you will find that you're always mentally stuck, like you don't know what to do. Okay, so you must have the objective in mind. The objective is always to make 1x, or rather to make something the subject. Okay, so that will be the basic idea first before we go to further technique. So there are also other technique involved. So this two is just a very, very basic question.